Hey everybody, welcome to the Vox Podcast. So glad you're tuning in. We are here today with Timothy John Stafford, Bonnie Gail Lewis, and Michael Carl Erie, present and accounted for, and still alive in quarantine. My quarantine haircut kind of is. I'm built for this.
Yes, you are.
You guys, may not be. I'm not sure.
I've just stopped all cutting of hair in general.
I don't have any dreads yet, so I feel like that's a good sign.
That's a good sign.
The bar is so low for my hair.
Has it?
I would love to see you pop up on one of these calls though with just a full head of dreads.
Just fro, full, like the whole screen is taken over, and then there's this little face. Beautiful.
Do you know that I'd led a missions trip to Jamaica years and years and years ago, and so I read the whole Rastafarian Bible just to read it before we went. And one of the interesting things about dreadlocks is that it's a form of the Nazarite vow.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know that it still is, but that's where a lot of the roots came from, was this idea of like Samson not cutting your hair. And
who knew?
that's your little tidbit of information for today's episode.
A Rastafarian update from Timothy Stafford.
Rastafarian update from the whitest dude in California.
All right, Bonnie, who are we talking to today?
Yes, so today we interviewed Rabbi Nahum Ward-Lev, and he is he's a rabbi and he's like a spiritual director, and he wrote this book called The Liberating Path of the Hebrew Prophets Then and Now. And so I picked up that book, I read it, and it was so fascinating to me. He does a really good job of going into the spiritual side of some of the things we read in the Old Testament. So originally we wanted to have him on and talk to us about Passover. So we booked him actually a few months ago. And then when we started recording, he said, I would love to talk about Passover, but I want to do it sort of in light of the coronavirus and what it means that like today we are in sort of this almost like a plague. I mean, really, and in our own sort of wilderness. So it was really neat. He did a great job, I feel like, of going into a spiritual side of things in terms of liberation and what that means. And I'm really excited because his take on it will be very great juxtaposed to another guest we have coming up, Amy Jill Levine, who's also, she's a Jewish theologian. So, and she's going to talk to us about like the Jewish background of Jesus. So it'll be really neat to see these two different sides of people's take on it. So yeah.
Yeah, and just a precursor, Rabbi's phone call audio was cutting in and out quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And but I left almost all of it in there. I took out a little bit, but mostly just because a lot of the things that he was saying were we were loving and kind of having fun interacting with. So some of it can be a little bit more arduous to listen to than other sections, but I left it in there because I think that if you put a little bit of work into pulling out the things that he's saying, it's worth going through it.
Yeah, agreed.
Here we go.
Hello and welcome. We are so excited. I am so excited. We have on one of my newest favorite authors, Rabbi Nahum Ward-Lev, and I was introduced to him through the Rob Bell podcast, and he wrote his newest book. He's written many books, but his newest book is called The Liberating Path of the Hebrew Prophets Then and Now. And so I picked it up because his interview was so compelling and it changed me. It was so good. And I thought it brought such a fresh take. It just like opened up the scriptures in so many ways. And so we really wanted to have you on, and we are so glad you're here. So welcome to the podcast. And why don't you tell just the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do, where you live, and maybe even how you became a rabbi or how long you've been one.
Hi, Bob. I'm really happy and honored to be you on the podcast. I live in New Mexico, and what I do here mainly is I lead a study group Beit Midrash, which means house of exploration. And it's a multi-faith study group that seeks wisdom in studying scriptures. And so that's been going on for 20 years. And I see people for spiritual direction, both here in Santa Fe and all over the country. And I lead retreats and workshops at churches, synagogues, seminaries, retreat centers
Awesome.
across the country. So that's what I do.
That is great. That's fascinating. And so I'm correct in saying this is your most recent book. Is that
Actually,
right?
It is my one and only book.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I just assumed that you had written so many because it was so good. Okay, well, you're welcome. So everyone needs to go buy it. But the things about what you do in this book that I absolutely loved is you have everything through this lens of the Israelites and people seeking liberation. And specifically, something that caught my eye is I think as a person that was brought up in the church and part of the Christian faith, I know a lot of the bullet points about sort of what Passover is, but it stops there for many people. I'd like to think that I sometimes might know more than the average because I also went to seminary, but then I read a work like yours and I realize there's so much spiritual depth to something like the Passover that it's not just these static events in history, but it's something that we revisit as a ritual or as a sacred space now for a very spiritual reason. And as you and I were discussing just a little bit, even before the call, there's such a tie here to liberation. So I wanted to have you on so you could talk to us about that, not only about sort of what the Passover is as we're coming up on Easter for the Christian community, but also the ties of this unique season that we find ourselves in with this global pandemic.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think that the place I'd like to start is that the folks that brought together the Hebrew scriptures, I believe that they're divinely inspired, but gathered and redacted by humans. The humans that brought together these divinely inspired scriptures were seeking to create a society that was an alternative society to the oppressive empires that they saw all around them and that they saw even in their own midst developing. That Israel essentially came out of, as you know from reading the book, came out of folks that had fled from Canaanite, the oppression of Canaanite cities, and went to the highlands, the unsettled highlands of Canaan, to create an alternative society. And so this sort of liberation was at the core of their mission. How do we be an alternative society and flourish? And so the holidays that they celebrate are deeply tied to this sense of being on a liberation journey. And so in the Bible, there are 3 pilgrimage festivals, 3 holidays in which the people actually made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Passover, Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, and Sukkot, the Feast of the Tabernacle. And these holidays, for an agricultural people, tied the agricultural seasons to the theme of liberation. So that Passover is the springtime holiday, and it's the holiday of the beginning of the greening of the world, and also for shepherds it was a time of lambing, so of giving birth. And so Passover was this sense of, as Easter, this birth, and then Shavuot is the next holiday, 50 days later, which is the mountaintop holiday when they receive the 10 Commandments, and that's the holiday of the beginning of the harvest, the first harvest. And Sukkot is the end is the festival of the ingathering of the harvest and the fruits of the harvest in the fall. And we have these 3 agricultural holidays that the people saw in liberation terms. And so Passover becomes the beginning of the liberation journey, and Shavuot becomes when they received the law from God, the Torah from God at Mount Sinai. And the third one, Tabernacles, Sukkot, becomes a celebration of the journey itself in the wilderness.
Mm.
So one thing I just add about that, it's meaningful to me that the Torah ends with Moses dying and the people being in the wilderness. I mean, there is the book after the fifth book, the sixth book in the Bible, which is not Torah. The Torah is a 5. The sixth book, Joshua, is the entry into the land of the promised land. And the redactors who put together the Bible and the Torah could have made the Torah have 6 books. And it would have been a good story to end with arriving in the promised land.
Yeah, that would have been a great story.
Yeah, a great story. We'd love that story.
Yeah, exactly.
It ends in a little bit of a downer otherwise.
Yeah.
Exactly. It ends with Moses dying and the people still in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And our festival of Sukkot, the harvest festival, could have easily been celebrating the arrival in the land, but it's not. It's we build these booths and the harvest festival to remember the journey in the wilderness. Is to say it's a liberation journey. Is to say that the human journey is an ongoing. We never get to the promised land. We get further in terms of what life offers us. We get closer to God. We become more loving. We can build our communities stronger. But we're all on this sense of whatever limits, whatever we've attained is always more that God is offering us. And that's really what it means to be touched by God. I mean, God is infinite. And so there's always more potential. So I think that sense of this ongoing liberation journey that starts with Passover, it is core to the Bible.
And I love that you said, you really flip that meaning of wilderness. I think, and I'm kind of drawing connections right now. Like I saw something on the internet that said, you aren't staying at home isn't like being, it's not a negative thing. It's keeping you safe at home, right? It's not like right now for our shelter in place, like being at home is actually its own type of wilderness in a sense. And I absolutely love that you translated, I believe you did. Tell me if I am remembering this wrong. But when you're talking about the wilderness, you talk about it being the wider place.
Yes.
Can you touch on that a bit? That was very profound for me.
Yeah, well, first of all, I love what you just said, which is for us now, the wilderness is being at home. I mean, we're not used to living this way. We're all learning new ways. Wilderness in the sense of it's the unknown. It's an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to develop new ways, So, I mean, also in Christianity, that Jesus' first move, as I understand it, and please correct me, is he's drawn into the wilderness too. I mean, leaving behind the settled places, and so I think it's really important. I mean, that these Hebrew scriptures are a testament calling people continually into the wilderness, to step into the unknown, to go places that they don't exactly know how they're going to fully manage it. It's beyond their control. Another way to say it is, we would like to domesticate this would be our world, to be in control, to have certainty, to diminish vulnerability. And testimony of the scriptures is this is God's world. And God is continually inviting us into new places. And it's not in our control, And so the great scholar Walter Brueggemann says that there's 2 different themes in narratives in the Bible. There's the royal narrative, the narrative of the elites, which is command and control. Like, we've got this all controlled. Don't worry about it. We've got it in control. Just do what we say and you'll be fine. We'll keep you safe.
Yeah.
And the prophetic narrative is actually, if you want to fulfill your destiny as a human society, you need to step out into the unknown. You need to take risks. You go into places that you don't feel control, but God is with you. And that's the core message, that God journeys with you and fills you with the potential to respond in creative and life-giving ways in the midst of this wilderness.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I love that you said that, because I think sometimes we can have this picture, especially in a sense of this pandemic, where we are so divided, right? First, it was globally. It's only a virus that was over there and affecting them. And then it sort of got closer, and suddenly it's affecting us. And so there's this disassociation a little bit, but at the same time, it was still hitting us because we're all connected in a way. And so when you just said that about how there's these two different narratives, that strikes me, because even when we're looking at things like the Passover, or that we're all sort of in this new wilderness, there is such a way and an invitation for us to read the scriptures to say, this happened to them, but there's an ongoing thing that can happen inside me. Like what you said in your book, you said the people are to recall the Exodus as if they had personally experienced the liberation themselves. And I thought that was so fascinating, because that requires a posture and a deep connection to knowing we need a liberation of something.
Yes. The essence of Passover is we're not celebrating what happened then. We are celebrating our own conviction to be on a liberation journey ourselves.
Yeah.
And in this moment, the one of the many strange things about this moment is we're so isolated from each other, and so we understand more deeply how much we need each other. And we've learned in a profound way the world is deeply, deeply interconnected. That, what happens in some little marketplace 3/4 of the way around the world comes here, and so in the Bible, in the prophets in particular, what the liberation journey is all about is entering more deeply into mutual reciprocal relationship. Into being a loving society. I think that Dr. Martin Luther King had exactly right. How to be the beloved community. That what freedom is not the freedom to do whatever you please. That's liberty. But what freedom is the ability to enter more deeply into love, into relationship, more deeply into being connected to each other. And so it's so much the challenge of this time of, it's clear we need to do this together. Our governor here in New Mexico got on the radio yesterday at a press conference. Basically, she said, doing all that we can. And she listed all the doing, at the state level, local level, in regard to the pandemic. And she said, but we can't do this if you do not shelter in place, that our efforts fall short. And the only way through this is together, And can we learn, this is a lesson, can we learn this lesson of we need to be in this together. We need to be concerned about the welfare of everybody. If there's a community or a nation where the virus is raging, it's going to come here, and so we better take care of them. That feels so essential for us to learn in this time. And I think that the liberation journey is how do we journey out of whatever limitations to seeing the other.
Yeah.
What blinds us from seeing the needs of the other? What blocks our hearts from caring for the other? And what liberation is moving beyond that a step towards the other.
Oh, yeah. No, I love that you said that. That struck me too. You said something just like that in the book, and you're talking about the role of the prophets. Mm-hmm. And you say they hold all of Israel responsible for the corrupted state of this society. This idea that, like you just said, we all play a part. I can do my part. You can do your part. We're all sort of connected, but we all have to do it. And that maybe the liberation some of us need is from this individualized nature that we have sort of grown very accustomed to. We've forgotten, in such a sense, that we belong to each other.
I think that's exactly right. We need to be remembering that we deeply and profoundly belong to each other. In one of the first half of the book is about the Bible, the second half of the book is about contemporary liberation thinkers, and I, in one chapter, bring together many of them, including Dr. Martin Luther King and Abraham Heschel and Martin Buber and many others, Paulo Freire, and they all say is the problem of modern society is that we've not been in caring, mutual, loving relationship to each other.
Yeah.
Under of the each other with God, and if we're not enacting that friendship with each other, then we're not enacting our friendship with God.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, this idea of, I mean, I don't know, because I don't spend a lot of time in Jewish culture as I do obviously in Christian culture. But one of the things that we see that's its own sort of pandemic is exactly that. This idea that somehow I can serve God, but I don't have to serve the other. And to realize, no, that's very much connected. You know, that's you really can't do one without the other. So here's a.
Can I say something now?
Yes, please do.
I think in many ways, well, I'll speak about Judaism, but it's probably true about other religions as well, that our understanding of spirituality has lost in some ways its moral muscle, meaning that we think of spirituality as being some sort of pious, mystical, connected relationship to God.
Yeah.
And as in the Torah and in the Bible, a fundamental part of spirituality is working for justice and concern for the other. I think to me it's really significant that at the beginning of the Ten Commandments, which in Hebrew tradition are not commandments, they're the 10 words, the 10 principles, God introduces God's self. And God could have said, I am the God who created all that is, who created billions of galaxies, who was there from the beginning to the end. But what God says is, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, which is to say, the most important thing you need to know about me, God, is I'm a God about liberation. I'm a God calling you on your liberation journey. And if you want to be with me, you need to be on this liberation journey, which involves looking at who's marginalized, who's oppressed, who's not getting the benefits of the society, and being concerned about those people who are on the margins, those people who are not fully participating, who don't have health care and housing and good educations and all of that.
Yeah. No, that's so true. That's exactly right. I love that you pointed that out. Why does Judaism say the 10 words? I'm thinking about what the phrase words does, what the fruit of that is versus commandments. I think so many times we've heard commandments and then they've really become this, for at least in the Christian tradition, this really rigid set of rules that makes God this mean person. And we don't hear about that first, that he's the God of liberation. So I'm compelled by that word choice there. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. You know, in the book, I think you noticed that I translated the word commandment as charge, which feels much more relational. The whole idea, and I do think that our traditions get co-opted by elite powers to interpret them in ways that serve elites. And so it serves elites to think of God as angry, punishing, controlling, authoritarian figure, the people as a wayward people who need that kind of authoritarian figure to keep them perhaps in line, you know? But the God of the Hebrew scripture is a God who wants to be in intimate relationship with the people and lead them on a liberation journey. So the whole idea of giving a commandment is I like it. I ever saw the movie Wives, where these wives are like automatons, know, like it's not like God wants automatons. It's not like God wants to say, yes, I'll do it exactly like that. There's no human development in that. There's no human growth in that. And God is concerned about the flourishing of everything, including the human being. So not concerned with blind obedience, concerned with intimate, faithful relationship, right? So the idea of words these are principles that we are aspiring ourselves to live by. Like, thou shalt not covet. Now, everyone has moments of coveting. It's not like we can just do that kind of thing. honor your mother and your father. These are things that we aspire to,
Yeah.
And so the other thing that's very sweet is that in Exodus, what are called commandments are called the 10 words. And in Genesis, God speaks, the rabbis understand, 10 times. And so the rabbis align the 10 sayings of the creation process and the 10 words of the 10 commandments as a way of teaching that these principles are woven into the fabric of creation itself, this is moral creation, which is to say, if you do not act in a way that serves the flourishing of all, your society will ultimately end down, because the world is designed in such a way that flourishing is energized and oppression is ultimately deconstructed.
Yeah.
So words and sayings between the relationship between Genesis, Exodus, between creation and those 10 words is really, really important in understanding that God not only created a physical world, but created a moral world as well.
Oh, that's really good. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I love that word choice and that picture, and bringing it back to being a God of liberation. It sets up these charges or these invitations as almost, I see them so differently now. Instead of like, these are things you must do, of these are things that will ultimately bring internal liberation on this like journey of life. I don't know. That's how I'm seeing it when you were saying it that way.
Exactly. I mean, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal. Once, God willing, none of us have murdered or stolen something, but have we fully honored life, in all its dimensions? No, that's aspiration. Have we dealt with our material being and what we own and possess in a way that's honoring all of nation? I think that's a goal that all of us need to meet. So rather than thou shalt not steal, something they have to do, it's really looking at what is your relationship to material goods and to consumption.
Yeah. Yes.
An aspiration, a principle to guide us.
Oh yeah, it's a guiding light there. I love that. I'm going to start using that to describe it now in such a different way. So we're in the middle of this pandemic, and we started talking about Passover, and that it was an event in history, but that it's a charge to relive that as in our own spiritual lives now. So I can't help but think about what it means to need liberation now, and how this is going to change us as a global people. I think we're used to having things change us individually and even maybe within our family. But this global sense of we're all sort of facing this same need to be liberated from this virus, and then from the economic fall downs, and from all of these different things that are coming from it. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, and how we can carry this forward, just as someone might carry the celebration of Passover forward as a celebration of liberation all the time. How can we carry this as we go forward, so we can hold it and we can continue to learn from it?
Yes. Thank you, Bonnie. I think that's such an important question, and it's something that I'm very much struggling with myself. In terms of the Passover story and the 10 plagues, we are living in the midst of a plague. And a really great Rabbi Sharon Brous in Los Angeles, she equated this to the ninth plague. The ninth plague was the plague of darkness, and the darkness was so thick that the people couldn't see each other. Yeah. And she makes the point, the plagues get increasingly worse, and what makes darkness so terrible is the ninth plague. And she says it's that the plague of we can't see each other, and that we've lost our connection to each other. And, and the way forward needs to be seeking every way we can, even while we're needing to isolate ourselves in our homes, but especially as we move forward into, we can leave our homes, to how do we move forward seeing each other, seeing everybody,
Yeah.
I think we're going to have an incredible risky opportunity to make a much more caring, interconnected world, or we could imagine regressing to a much more selfish, self-centered world, so I think that something that I've been thinking about is that, the Egypt for the people in the Bible was a very dark and dangerous place. And there's plagues of dark and dangerous time. And, in the story, the Israelites during the 10th plague are all huddled in their home, like we're all huddled in our homes. And so part of the message I'm taking is that how do we find God present right here, right now, in this place? What is God that we can find here? And the people in some way found this God operation in the darkest place. So can we find the presence of this God that calls us to free all of us and to enter into loving relationship? Can we deepen enough to find this God in this dark place? So that's one thought I have. The other thought is the liberation wasn't like, oh, great, we leave Egypt and we've arrived in the promised land. Like we talked about earlier, liberation was into a wilderness, which had its own demands and fears and challenges. And I think that if we want to put together something that we think is going to be the promised land, we're not going to be listening. That we really need to be willing to be on a long, sustained journey towards more and more just society. The rabbi said that there were 49 different stages that the people had to go through between Egypt when they received the Torah at Mount Sinai. And it's the wisdom of the liberation thinkers I cited in my book. Like we don't know how to move forward, how to create this new society that we want. We don't know it all, but what we can know is two things. We can know the direction in which we go, which is towards liberation, which means towards more seeing the other, listening to the other, beloved community. And we can do our best to say, what's the next step? What's the next step that we can take towards more loving community? And I think if we think practically about healthcare and about immigration and about housing and about employment and about wages and about immigration and about all those things, we can discern, well, what's our next best step? It's not the promised land, but it's heading in the direction of caring for the welfare of all. And I think that's really important, because otherwise we get so limited in our imagination. The prophets are so much about imagining something that's unimaginable. Like God says to Isaiah, do you see I'm doing a totally new thing here? Take a look, see it. And if we expect ourselves to come in full vision, we're going to limit our imagination. I think we need to use our imaginations to see, well, what's the direction and what is the next step that we can take on our communal liberation journey.
I love that.
I think that's very beautiful. And there's such a through line with all this, with the charges, right? And where's a charge? how does it resonate in this time? Because in our little town here in California, while we're watching all those small businesses, we've been having weird power outages because of fires. So they've been shutting our power down for in the earlier part of the year, and then now with the shelter in place, all these small businesses, we're watching all these friends and neighbors, like their livelihoods are collapsing and they're freaking out, and it's hard to look and find the ways to support and to be intentional with community, and to try to be imaginative, and to try to be so intentional with the way that we reach out. Like yesterday I saw an article about in Nevada on the in the parking lots, they're painting isolation squares for the homeless to sleep on. And instead of trying to deal with helping, one of the richest nations in the world, trying to figure out how to actually give shelter to people, they just painted 6-foot squares for people to sleep on. And it's just, I don't know. It's a difficult time. I love this idea because I think, like you said earlier, this idea of an infinite God, kind of, trying to chase after this infinite God, that is a pursuit that continues, and then we can never quite get the whole thing. And I love this idea that imagination is so necessary to continually grow in that way, and that this is the time to really kind of, dig into that imagination and figure out what that charge is.
Each other.
Yeah,
in a new way.
In Santa Fe, we have a whole bunch of empty hotel rooms, and so the city is paying a sum, but less than the full rent of the full fee, to put homeless people in hotel rooms.
That's amazing.
And we're using services to bring food and other needs there. So, yeah.
I read this. Yeah. That reminds me. I read this book to my kids, and it's called, I think it's called "That Is," or "God Must Be Like That," and it's about this little boy who says he can't see God, but then he goes throughout his day and he sees kindness and love and joy, and then he learns, oh, God must be like that. And so when you were saying that about sort of in the dark, can we see each other and can we find God? When I hear stories like that about hotel rooms, I think, oh, God must be like that. This idea of, oh, we are starting to see people on a new level.
I love that. And seeing what people are doing that's inspired, and say, oh, God must be like that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a children's book, and we read it because of course they do, because I do struggle with, I don't ever see God. I don't. So I kept trying to say, gosh, how can I get that point across? And then I stumbled across it, and it's a beautiful book. It's a really good book. I wanted to ask you. Yes.
Today I have a study partner studying a great rabbi who wrote a book called Ori Naim, the light of the eyes, and Rabbi Nahum of Chernobyl, and great teaching, which is that when you fall into a dark place, what do you do to find God there? And he says, you say to yourself, am I alive? And if you're alive, that God is the aliveness in all this. And so if I'm alive, God is with me in this aliveness.
Yeah.
So, and then I think about, well, then how is this aliveness calling me forward to be of service, in this dark place?
Yeah.
But so you think, that, God is like that. It's so helpful, I find, to say, well, am I still alive? In this day, that's a gift.
Yeah, it really
I'm alive,
is.
and then to feel the aliveness in us, and to feel that God's presence as that aliveness. And I think as we come into contact with that, then it's us forward onto the next step for us. And
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's so true. Anytime there is an aliveness, that is where that must be what God is like.
Yeah, I've been trying to go on hikes. Whether I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing that in the mornings, but we live right on a canyon, so I've just been kind of going down into the canyon in the mornings, and you'll get about halfway down, and you're in all the trees. It's been raining, so everything's very green. The river is running, and you kind of get that feeling of it's quiet, and you can just, I don't know. For me, in a lot of ways, that's kind of the slowing down and just listening for a second and feeling and seeing. And being able to just stop and process and think and listen and, all that kind of stuff. Those have been kind of some of those moments of a little bit of freedom within the darkness, that aliveness within the darkness.
Yeah, I also find that going outside and going up the mountains, being in the forest is it's medicine I need right now, so life-giving. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the miracle of anything's alive, and the miracle, in our, the miracle of a juniper, the miracle of pinyon, the miracle of a flower.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Can I ask you too, something at heart, I'm a deeply creative person. I love, to create things and to look at things from different angles. And so I live with this tension, and I think a few people that I've talked to right now in this space do too. So we have this sense of darkness and isolation and aloneness. And then I have that same sense, but in sort of this cocoon or womb, something that reminds me of like the belly of the whale scenario, that like this hope that we're going to come out and have a rebirth into something new, right? Like this imagery, like I keep thinking about, there was so many of the images of God as a mother hen protects her children, like this sort of place, or even in Ezekiel 37, where you see this womb language of the bones coming together, like what happens when a baby is formed. So I have this sense of despair and isolation and darkness, but then I have this other sense of darkness that feels much like what it feels to be knit together again, and sort of I have this bubbling hope. And so I don't know, do you feel like that's there too? What are your thoughts on that sort of stuff that sort of bubbles up even in the midst of pain and fear and anxiety?
Well, I don't know if I can say it any better than you just did. I love that, and that sense of God being the womb one. Yeah. And the womb one. And it's a common term for God in rabbinic literature that God is the Rachaman. The God is the womb one. And that womb is a dark place.
Yeah.
And it's a dark place full of creative potential, right?
Yeah.
And so that's so true for us now. This is very, we of course don't want to deny the darkness, the reality, and the suffering and awfulness. And when things are all falling apart, the potential for creativity and newness is so great. And we particularly need humans to find out that we are all artists, that God calls us all to be creative and to be artists. And the artist in all of us is being called forward in this time. How can I bring forward something, and including social art, including by that I mean how we live together, how we can bring forth imaginative, creative possibility out of this dark time.
Yeah. I love
I
that.
think that there'll be attempts to clamp down and go back, and so our energy in envisioning and enacting and in dreaming and creating is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like maybe that is the paintbrush of how we end up seeing each other. You know, when we can remember that we're artists and that we're creative, I think there's something that happens there in that process that I get to see you differently because I see what you're bringing into the world, and I see Tim differently, or those people around us, because of the space we get to make for each other in this time. It's unique.
I love that notion that you just articulated about seeing each other as artists. What are we bringing forward? You know, I think it's really powerful that after the liberation, when the people are in the wilderness, the first thing that they do is they get busy as artists building the tabernacle. You know, and it says clearly that, you know, people were bringing all kinds of stuff. They were bringing threads of crimson and gold, and they were bringing different skins and fabric, you know, bringing together, and you know that they were all participating. You know, and it's in a way it's a stark contrast to the slaves who were building the pyramids for Pharaoh. You know, that rather than that, everybody was there. Everyone's wisdom was woven into, and I really like that sense of threading things together. And so what it would be like to realize that, I mean, not only every person, you know, life form is doing something creative in this very moment, you know.
Yeah.
It's like I'm looking out at my pear trees, you know, and they're about to bring forward these beautiful blossoms. I mean, how do they do that to take, you know, sun and water and soil and make these beautiful, I mean, that's artistry, you know, but to look on all of us as artists in our own way, that we're all called, you know, I think we're called to love and to create. That's what we're called to do, to love and to create.
Yeah, that's a beautiful image. And that disparity between the pyramids and the tabernacle that's a really powerful image. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while.
For a long time. Yeah. And how we bring forth, what we bring forth, to what motives, under who, you know, how we're seeing each other.
This weaving of humanity to build a temple, like, is a really a very powerful image.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up, go ahead.
Please go, Tony.
I was going to say your pear tree. Because I noticed that as well. Like, the whole world seems to have stopped, yet we have a flowering pear tree. It's non-fruit outside of our house. And all of a sudden one day it's like it just bursts forth. And I was reminded, like, oh, the whole world hasn't stopped. Like, there's still something moving and creating.
There's a spring coming
newness.
after this winter.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And among our own selves in our isolated homes, we're also, I mean, God is also at work in each one of us, calling us to bring forth. Yes.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Nahum. This has been so soul giving. I rarely go back and listen to episodes, but I'm going to go back and listen to this one. It actually took a lot of restraint for me not to take notes. And I was like, you can go back. You can listen again.
Well, I've had fun. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Tim. This has been fun, very much fun for me. It's been alive for me. And, well, it's really been a great pleasure. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm grateful to both of you.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Wish you well in yours, and wish you well in both taking care of yourself and in your art.
You too. I love it. You too. Thank you so much. This has been such a treat. So thank you.
Shalom, shalom.
All right. So that was the interview, and I hope you guys were able to pick out some of his key phrases despite the audio. And Tim, thank you so much for doing all that. There was so much in there that made me think. There was so much in there that made me look at the scriptures differently of then and now. So I don't know. We hear so much right now about I got a text message from somebody yesterday about how this virus was God's judgment. And they pointed out like locusts that were in Africa and an earthquake and the fires in Australia. And so we should like repent and return. So to hear him draw upon sort of the liberation aspect of the plagues and the wilderness and God taking care of us was a totally different take of still using scripture to find our place sort of, but not in this judgmental way. And the other thing that really stuck out to me was when he said, we practice Passover, we celebrate Passover because it happened, but also because it should keep happening within us. And that really made me think about Good Friday and Easter. I generally do think of those things just as historical events and not as a continual spiritual journey that I'm on as well, or that we are on as well. So that sort of shifted focus for me, which was timely considering it's coming up.
Yeah, it's interesting. Paul does the same thing as a good Jewish thinker. He does the same thing with the crucifixion, right? It's not just something that happened as an event, but we are being crucified with Christ.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing, present reality. It's not just that Jesus died, so I don't have to, but I am in the process of joining him in his crucifixion. And I've always been super fascinated by Jewish spirituality because there are many reasons. One, it's just super earthy.
Yeah.
It's not far off, like Moses writes in Deuteronomy. Two, I love that it's about here and now, not just then and there, somewhere else. But I love the practice. I think it's called amnesis. It's not remembering as if something were happening, but it's reenacting. So when he said, we're not celebrating what happened then, we're celebrating our journey today. That's what that kind of active remembering is. And Paul invites us into it in, not only the crucifixion, but in communion. So it's not just, he uses all these different tenses when we talk about the Lord's Supper.
Yeah.
And so I loved, first of all, I would just want to be friends with that dude.
I know.
And then, but I love kind of the window into Jewish spirituality because a lot of people I've met over the years who are from that perspective just marvel at how crazy and weird Christians are with their obsessions about the afterlife. Like their whole spirituality is driven by that.
Yes.
And so that was a great counter.
I know, because that's a really great point, Erie, because even when I'm grasping the here and now, right, I still have a drive of the afterlife being like, well, I should practice here and now because someday in the afterlife, it's still connected. Do you know what I mean? It's so very much a driving force. And part of that's just the way the church I grew up in. But yes, you're right. I have another friend who's a rabbi, and I'll ask her a question and she'll say, oh, that's not in the text. That's something you're imparting on, like an Old Testament text. She's like, that's something you're imparting maybe from your heritage or whatever it is. But from our standpoint, we're not even thinking about the afterlife in that text. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, it's very different.
Well, and I think Paul is eschatological in the sense of he has this now and not yet vibe, right? That we've talked about before, that there is something happening now and there is something happening in the future. But what we've done, so there is that kind of thinking for sure in the Bible, but it's not, because you're right on, it's not the punishment, the carrot and the stick kind of thinking that drives it, right? It's much more, in the New Testament, it's much more around what goes into new creation as opposed to me being judged in my individual good and bad deeds, and there's a movie that plays in heaven, and so I'm fearful of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally does. Yeah. So I love. Oh, go ahead.
No, go.
I was just gonna say I love that because when you bring up Paul there, because when I have conversations like this, or hear conversations like this, or read conversations like that, it helps me read some of that Jewishness that, like you're saying in Paul, that I have traditionally imparted American evangelicalism on the text. So to go, oh no, that is in there. It opens it up for me a bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tim,
what were your...
Yeah. Tim, go.
There was two things. One for me is that I think, Mike, you've done a good job of this in the past. Like, we tend to not have a very good relationship or understanding of the Old Testament. You know, I think I definitely grew up in a world that was very New Testament focused, right? And a lot of times at youth events or stuff, they only give you the New Testament. Maybe you've got Psalms in there as well, but it was those little like redacted Bibles that only had New Testament. And so having people like Mackie and different people on that kind of crack it open a little bit and be like, hey, this is here's how you can read this, and here's how this goes hand in hand with the New Testament and stuff. So, and then going through Acts right now at church and just kind of sitting in this idea of this marginalized Jewish sect that goes on this journey, and that we then become like adopted into that, and we take on the lineage of that and kind of take on a lot of the history of that as part of our... So when he's talking about all this stuff, and he's not going past the breaking point of Old Testament and New Testament, right? Jesus is not coming to this conversation, and sitting in all this stuff and taking, like, kind of just marinating in this culture that we have become part of, to me is really fascinating, or that lineage is kind of in there. And so I really appreciated that. And then we were talking about the one thing that really stuck with me that I was going to be thinking, and I'm still thinking about, this has been a couple days now, was the people weaving together the tabernacle, the story that he told about that, like the pyramids being built bricks by slaves, and this tabernacle being built by the community coming together and weaving together all of what they could bring to it. Yeah. Like building this family quilt or whatever, and the difference between those two structures and what they stood for, and then how they were built, and this one being woven together with all of God's people bringing what they could to build it and to weave that together is such a beautiful image. Yeah. And that has kind of stuck with me. That's been kind of hanging on me, that I just keep going through and processing over and over again and thinking about. I don't know why, but that really struck me. Yeah,
I think I agree. And it was so funny. He said it's just like, that's a normal thought he has. And we were like, whoa. It was a passing. Yeah. Say that again. I know. Yeah, no, I agree. It's a beautiful picture. And I think so timely in terms of maybe even how we'll be different when we come out of this coronavirus thing, right? Like, I think I hope we have, or I feel a stirring of that we're remembering how connected we are and how much we need each other and how we all depend on each other. And so we can see some of that now. But also I hope in the future, we're not looking at it as... That's an interesting
time for the church.
Yeah. We're not
Mike, you brought that up in was it the last one, or I can't remember which one, but you brought up the idea that there's a beautiful deconstruction that needs to happen with the church, and this could be it, right? Am I wording that correctly? That could be happening now, and you're seeing a lot of churches trying to be intentional and innovative with how to reach their community, and there could be some really wonderful seeds sown if that continues out of this. Like, once the doors are all open back up and we're all kind of creeping out of our houses with, dreadlocks and full beards and whatever, like, it'd be interesting to see the church, like, do we push into this new thing where we've been trying to be intentional with our community and with each other, or will everything kind of just go back to, will we want to go back to the status quo? Yeah. Kind of pick up the original MO. Yeah. We'll see. I don't know.
We will. So yeah, any more thoughts?
No.
Well, no, go ahead, Tim.
No, I don't.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, Mike, give us some thoughts.
No, I mean, I always need to be reminded that the step after liberation is wilderness and not promised land. And he rightly, brought that same pattern up with Christ, right? And the way Jesus responds to the temptations, those were the temptations given Israel in the wilderness. I mean, this is a huge part of Jesus's ministry, was learning in the wilderness, right? To be hungry, to do without, to, all of those sorts of things. And so I always want to skip wilderness and head straight to promised land. But the point of wilderness is to learn how to be free, right? To live as a free people. And so what God does in Exodus is, he's teaching them all of these brutal, but critical lessons of here manna. I'm actually going to teach you that you can't feed yourselves, but I will feed you. Do you know what I mean? That's a brutal lesson. That's a hard freaking lesson. But and he literally 40 years worth of wilderness wandering. And so it just strikes me, as he was talking about Passover, that when I hear the word liberation, I immediately think of, oh, great, whatever liberation means to me. And I think of blessing, or I think of whatever. And that's not quite what it is.
Right.
Liberation means you're now available to be formed.
Yeah.
Into newness. Because sometimes the promised land is so different from what you've experienced, you would reject it, or you would be afraid of it, or you wouldn't claim it.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I love that you said that the wilderness is how we learn to be free. That's such a crazy picture, because you would think, oh, I'm set free, I know what to do. And it's not. Slavery is so habitual and ingrained. And they even say that too, of people that have been rescued out of sex slavery, or these different things, child trafficking, or even abuse. And then it takes them a long time to learn to be free. So that's a great picture.
Well, you even have examples in American culture where the Emancipation Proclamation was announced and proclaimed by Lincoln, but it took years for that to really filter into the consciousness. At least 100.
Yeah.
But in reality, it took about a decade or so, I've read, for some African American folks to actually believe they were free.
Yeah.
And so no, it's just an interesting thing. So Passover becomes, in the New Testament, it's a salvific picture of what Jesus does, but it's also this beautiful sort of poetic illustration of what Jesus does over the course of a life. Not just in a moment of salvation, but over the course of what it is when he says, live a life worthy of the calling you've received. Like, that happens in the wilderness.
Yeah.
That's not stuff that just happens naturally,
Yeah.
And it seems like we spend a lot of time, I don't know if you'd agree with this, Bonnie, but it seems like we spend a lot of time on the getting to the freedom part, and not a heck of a lot of time on the wilderness and the necessity of the wilderness part. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I would totally agree. And even no matter which side, right? Like if you're deconstructing, or even if you're consider yourself very conservative, whatever it is, I think we all do that. It's like, it's the sticky, the middle, the learning to be free, the letting go, the holding intention, that we want to rush that up, like speed that up. And we also don't talk about it a lot. Yeah. Yes.
Or we'll set it in opposition to faith.
Yes, that is so true. Yes, when I, after we lost our baby and there was this big season of grief, that was obviously a wilderness of its own. And people would always say, like, oh, I see you're super struggling, or you've lost your faith, or this and that. And I'm like, wait, what?
Right. And
no.
You're like, well,
actually, and so it's so funny. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, wilderness, I don't know. Tim, going back to your question about how the church emerges, I find the distinction between the temples and the pyramids versus the tabernacle to be very relevant in what the church decides to do out of this.
Yeah.
And in other words, you have this great opportunity to, I was going to use strong language there, to dispense with the polish and excellence and showman and womanship of the whole production, and get back to the, what this has done. This has flattened everything.
Yeah.
You know, I open Facebook and they're just random people on there preaching.
Yeah.
Right?
I know.
And then they're really good people preaching to. I mean, it's just an interesting thing. Will we want the pyramids again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know, in a harsh kind of way, there is liberation in all of this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As we're liberated from our distraction and from our amusement and now we're confronted with our deep sadness, our disappointment, our families. You know, it's just interesting.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. You know, this is very much wilderness.
Yeah.
So I thought the rabbi lived up to that title, you know, very well.
Yeah. Yeah. He was great. He was
a very good man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well. Oh yeah, that was good. It's just like so much to think on, and it's so on so many
levels. Did I just ruin it?
No, it was perfect.
What just happened?
It was like a mic drop. It was like a mic drop moment. So I didn't.
We're just all processing together.
Yeah, I was like, oh gosh, yeah. I was like, all these images are going through my head. I'm like.
It's just hard not to correlate it to like, and we've already talked about this, and we can be done with the episode, but the with like the people looking in the Venice canals right now and seeing the fish and seeing dolphins swimming in there, and they're like, oh my, like, what in the world? And then the satellites seeing China for the first time in a very long time through the smog and stuff. Right. There's like this like a little bit of a reset, it feels like, and I don't ever want to minimize a lot of the, you know, obviously the sickness and the death and the things that are happening, and to not ever take away from that. But we are seeing like these little glimpses of that. And so when I think about that, and I think about, I can edit all this stuff out, but this is a question more. I'm trying to remember, like, one of the things that God was doing with when they were in exile, and he was like, you're going to get back to this place, but what I want you to not do is I don't want you to make any treaties, because I want you to rely on, like, this whole point of this was learning how to rely on me and see the freedom in this, right? And then the first thing they do when they get there is make treaties and kind of try to set up their own, like, comfort zone. And you just see God being like, like
I just said. Yeah, it's so true. I read a thing too that said the earth was shaking less. It said because people are staying at home, the like normal noise and seismic activity of the earth has quieted.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it was like there's usually this low grade rumble we hear all the time because people are out and factories are running and buses and whatever, but now that's not happening. And I just had this picture of like the earth in and up, like we're sheltered at home and we're forced to be quiet, but like the actual earth itself has like is still has like quieted down. And what a crazy picture that is.
Think about, I mean, that's so good, you guys, because there's, what did God intend for the year of Jubilee? Right? So like you're building into the rhythm a day off every week, and then a year off every 7. And then after 7 sevens, you have this year of Jubilee. And what was God enforcing there? It was like it was a nationwide Sabbath economically, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, right? I mean, it was forced, exactly what you're saying. It was forced Sabbath. Debts were forgiven. Land went back to its property. I mean, it was like it massively restructured society. Yeah, and that's why they never did it. Yeah. And I mean that's But you look at the conversations that are being had around how do we care for the artists and the waiters and the servers and the people in the service industries? How do we thank the medical workers, and how do we applaud the teachers, and how do we take 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks and we're not able to find or be as productive as we want to be. You know what I mean? Like there's some deep prophetic stuff in there. That doesn't mean it's from God or that God's happy people are dying or anything like that. but you're right. There is something. There's a groaning, that's been. It almost feels like it's been building up.
Yeah.
For years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I'm really hopeful.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
In a weird way, I think it's brutal and awful and terrifying, and yet, I think a conversation like this comes with the rabbi. I think it just comes at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did, and that we'd love to hear your thoughts on wilderness and kind of what this space is bringing up for you guys, and how we can all come together.
Bam.